Welcome to Factor the Future podcast. I'm A.W. Schultz with Alexandria Burek today, and today we've got Victoria Mensch, who is Welcome to Factor the Future podcast. I'm A.W. Schultz along with Alexandria, and today we have Dr. Victoria Mensch, who is a Silicon Valley veteran, a UC Berkeley MBA, and is CEO SVEA. She goes into revealing how AI drives burnout when companies chase productivity over transformation. She shares the marketing overload, chatbot empathy failures, and we also get into some of the new technologies that have been stumbling over the way, in addition to how other companies have been making the ways of innovations on certain roles, like IKEA's agent to designer wins, and why leaders must value irreplaceable human skills while owning their own careers and resistance to change. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Factor the Future, people-powered health. Podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Okay, so Victoria, the one thing that is bothering Alexander and I, and you say that AI leads to burnout, but that's not possible because AI is supposed to be making our jobs easier. So take me to school on this. How is it possible?
I say AI may lead to burnout, and often does. I'll tell you a story. So I spoke recently with one of the executives in one of the major Silicon Valley companies, and she happened to be a VP of marketing there. And she said, we embrace AI with all our hearts and minds and time and everything. We have all the tools possible. But now the problem is that the company expects humans to perform with the same level of productivity as AI does. And I think that is really a pivotal point here. So if we talk about AI and what we expect from AI and how we implement AI in organizations, a lot of times we're chasing productivity. So if within that, your goal is really increasing that productivity at any cost, then that human element gets lost because we really won't be able to produce as many pieces of content as AI in the same time. Where it really starts making sense if we start realizing the value of AI beyond just doing things faster and cheaper, and really embracing the transformational value of this technology. How can we do things better? And that's what actually helps to elevate that human element in work, and that what should help to alleviate the burnout. Does that make sense, A.W.?
Yeah. So if I'm unpacking that a little bit, it's that. But I guess what I see is what you're explaining is that there's AI and the human element seems like they're fighting against each other. Where I always thought it was more of a AI is that from pulling from the toolbox that element that boosts you up. It's that portion of it that's kind of thrown me off.
What I heard was a little something different, AW. And Victoria, you can correct both of us and tell us we're both wrong, but I heard that it's not that the human isn't feeling more productive or able to accomplish more. It's that the expectation from leadership or from the business after this gross investment in AI is that the people can also keep up at the same pace. Is that more the problem, or did I hear you incorrectly?
Well, I think the dichotomy here is that what is the purpose of implementing AI within an organization? And one road is to chase productivity. For example, as a marketing manager, I used to write one blog post a week. And now with AI, I can write 100 blog posts a day. and I don't even need to be involved. So if that's the metric that you apply toward your people, then obviously no person can keep up. Now, what you can do, you can unbundle the task of that writing a blog and say, well, the most interesting part here, the creative part here, what is this about? How do I actually ask the question that needs to be answered? What is it that my customers want? How can I change it? Maybe I don't need to write a blog anymore. Maybe there are other ways to reach out to customers and market my product and do my work. But that cannot be measured if all you're counting is the number of blog posts. Does that make sense? Is that helping? And a lot of organizations right now, and a lot of experimentations is really going toward that. We're chasing productivity. So I had 100 of customer service representatives, for example, that were an expense item on my P&L. And now I can put just a chatbot on the website. So on paper, on surface, this is the no-brainer. And then you go further, and a lot of companies figured out that, oh, there is actually more value to customer service representatives than answering frequently asked questions. So there is a human element in that, where they can see what's beyond those questions, where they can express empathy, where they can find solutions that are not algorithmic. And that's where the value, a different value and transformative value comes from. So that's a different mindset from a leadership perspective of companies who want to really take full advantage of the technology, such as AI.
That makes a lot of sense. So we can't use old measures of success with kind of new technology, right? So maybe in the past it was, what was your output? What is, the very kind of like linear measuring stick, right? But what we're talking about is a lot of things that it's unseen, it's soft skills, it's all these other examples, right? So to your point about the customer service, I was calling Best Buy for something yesterday, and they're like, we have a new AI agent. This AI agent may not be so slick, so please be patient with it. And I was like, okay, like I need to talk to a person. Like, I didn't get that. And so then I went through this loop of, I didn't get that like 15 times, like before I was able to talk to a person. And I told the person, I said, you guys should probably scale back the use of your AI agent until you actually have it figured out, because it's not working and it's a bad customer experience. So.
And this is very common reaction, Alexander, right? So we personally, a lot of people now, when you're telling the story, a lot of people would have this emotional response that now if I want to reach out to customer service, my first line of support will be chatbot. And I'm terrified. I really don't want to talk to another chatbot that's poorly implemented. So then the opportunity from a company perspective, if you think about that impact that you can have from your investment from AI, right? So how do I go beyond that and really make it a competitive advantage? So people would actually want to talk to me. And I will be able to provide that value. So, and that really requires that mindset shift that we're talking about. So it's not you in your P&L structure, you don't just look at P&L, but you're actually saying, how can I do things differently? Mm-hmm. It is an opportunity. This is a technology that really allows you to reconsider so many things. Maybe there's so many actions and activities and tasks that you don't need to do anymore, but you wouldn't be able to even figure out what they are if you don't step up and look at, if I were to start my business today, given the technology that's available now, how would it look differently?
And you primarily circle around the Silicon Valley area. One of the things that, I've done a lot of research into it is have you ever come to a client and realized that they're not ready for it yet? Understanding what their digital maturity is and maybe taking a step back and saying, this is all good stuff, but there's also the people culture that we have to bring them along with.
Yes, the companies are definitely at different levels of readiness for major, especially technological transformations. But also when you start looking at that transformational journey, you have to understand that you can enter at different levels as well. So the first one, the earliest, even if the company's structure is not ready, the infrastructure, the culture, the people are not ready, there is an opportunity, at least on the visionary level, to start thinking about how could it look differently. So one of the things that we keep talking about, and I think Silicon Valley really contributes into this as well, is that the uncertainty increases dramatically. So we all know that on the personal level, on the cultural level, on the organizational level, we live a time of uncertainty. So the only thing is certain that there will be uncertainty of how things are going to roll out. So being able to recognize that uncertainty and embrace it and prepare to deal with uncertainty, right? And just understand that it's there, the awareness of this, and then start preparing the infrastructure to deal with that uncertainty going forward. That's a big step as well. And then from there, you actually say, well, what would it take on the organizational level to embrace that more of the innovation mindset, more of the innovation activities, more of the changes and how we can introduce them. Because one of the really difficult, the most difficult, I think, in this transformation and innovation effort is that you need to start making changes before you actually have to, right? So there is this, I need to preempt, right, what's coming at me. And I don't know what's coming, and nobody knows what's coming. So how do you actually deal with that?
Do you have an example you can share that you've come with recently?
So one of the examples that I think everybody can relate to is an example of Netflix, right? So Netflix is a company that started mailing CDs once the CD technology became available. And then they were very successful in that. And then all of a sudden, without really any pressure from outside, they started a streaming service. They added that streaming service. Nobody asked them to do that. It was really a visionary a statement from the founder and the executive team of Netflix, who kind of foresaw where the future is going. So they, in a sense, introduced a disruption to their core business, self-disruption, with that new service. So, and that's what Silicon Valley companies really excel at. They really mastered that art of self-disruption. Let's say Facebook, or Meta, as we call it now, with their experiments with the virtual reality, hence the change in name. It's not like there was a ton of customers that said, well, if you don't introduce virtual reality to your services, we're going to stop using Facebook. No, right? So this is really an attempt to preempt the changes that are coming.
And also a strategy to prevent like their own extinction, right? So it's almost like they're getting ahead of an extinction by competitors by almost self-extincting their existing services. So like your Netflix example and things like that. Another thing that's kind of, I'm curious about, and what I've been picking up on as you've been talking about different things, is it sounds like what you're advocating for is, rather than replace, a redeploy model. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot with regards to AI, how to use it in the workplace, how to help businesses use it more effectively to make kind of everything better for people and the business. But I think one of the concerns I have is that there's a lot of leaders who will take the replace versus redeploy approach. And so one of the things I've been sharing a lot about, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is the IKEA example. They had this 8,500 customer service agents that were very skilled and knowledgeable in their design catalog and experts on exactly all the IKEA catalog. And instead of taking them from customer service and laying them off, they redeployed them as designers and created a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream. So I'm interested to hear about, like, are you trying to help companies figure out what the redeployment reskilling looks like? Is that part of the transformation efforts that you're doing, or is that kind of something that you're not really too involved with?
Just a quick break, and then we'll get right back to the show. We are always open for meaningful sponsorship or guests that align with our audience. If your brand fits and would like to be on one of the top 10% podcasts in the world, let's chat. Reach out by email in the show notes. Back to the show.
Well, most of the conversation that we have is really how to bring AI from pilot stage to the company-wide deployments. And then as part of that, there is always the strategic discussion. What is it that we actually want to achieve with this? And that's where that discussion comes from. These are not mutually exclusive. Obviously, there's an opportunity to improve the processes that you currently have. But your main, really, and the most value would come from that understanding of what the transformational value of AI is. And that's the most difficult because, again, because of that uncertainty that's around us, because we are creating this future all together, collectively, individually. It's not that somebody, hands it over to us. Somebody already figured it out. This is something that's happening as we speak. And I think in general, if you look at the technology, we tend to overestimate the impact of technology on the short term and underestimate the impact in the long term. And how do you sustain, that focus on that long-term value? That's where I think one of the biggest leadership challenges is as well.
I guess one question that came to mind as you're having these conversations and working through these kind of roadmaps, what are some of the things that you're really optimistic or pleasantly surprised by when you hear leaders talking? Like, a lot of people are in the doom and gloom and AI is bad and leaders just want to replace people. We're all going to be unemployed in 5 years and everything is going badly. But I feel like you're probably in certain rooms and you might have an opportunity to shed light on some of the positive perspectives and really, really good things that are being discussed in these rooms that maybe not everybody has access to. So on a positive note, what are you hearing that's really encouraging for the future?
If I'm to look at the last couple of years of these conversations in AI, we started really positively. Once the AI tools became more available, we started really positively. It's like, oh, I can't believe how much help can I get out of these tools. And then very quickly, we actually went kind of in the downward spiral that, well, if AI can do that, what am I going to do, right? So that replacement fear and almost... so replacement fear and lots of hysteria almost, right? Yeah. And identity crisis. What am I to do if all of this, what I used to do well, and the way I built my career, my success, my business, is now can be easily done through AI. And now I feel like we are on that upward trajectory where there is an understanding that we can unbundle our jobs, right? So we can look beyond individual tasks and really create and figure out what it is that we actually do and what the contribution is. So one of the examples that I think, very famous, that was the saying from a NVIDIA CEO. He said, I don't want my software engineers to code, right? So a lot of software engineers are really afraid with the vibe coding, with the AI coding, that they are not needed anymore. And instead, I don't want my software engineers to code. If I figure out by the end of the year this engineer did not use 250K of tokens of AI, then I think he did not do, or she did not do their job, right? So I want software engineers to solve problems. So I think that's an opportunity, and I think that we're kind of getting to that opportunity is what it is that the core value of what we can contribute. And I think that's the most productive and the most optimistic discussion that I hear right now, that we're really on that upward trajectory, and we're definitely starting to see what's beyond of just this productivity gains, that we can type faster, and the machine can type faster, and the code can be written faster. So like our podcast, for example, right? And yours as an editor or as a producer of a podcast, somebody say, well, yeah, you sit around and I speak all day. but this is just a task, right? So, but the problem that you're solving is so much bigger and so much better, and cannot be really fully executed by a technology such as AI.
Interesting.
So, go ahead, AW.
I guess I was ready to shift gears. Did you have something similar to?
I was just going to say I'm very encouraged by that, because that's the way I've been thinking a lot about my life, my career, a business that I'm building, which leverages AI technology. And when I'm having these conversations with business owners and leaders, my statement is you need your people to solve the problems that AI can't and isn't proficient at. You need your people focused on dealing with the people in your organization, not doing data entry or document management or things like that. So it's encouraging to hear that other people are thinking about, using AI in parallel, but really still focusing a lot on like what the humans bring to the table and what their core strengths are, which is problem solving and kind of using all of these different experiences that, despite AI's intelligence, can't really be translated into necessarily every single business environment, every single scenario. So I'm glad to hear that you're seeing the same things, and it sounds like we're all on the right page there. AW, what were you?
Well, I was just, talk about the people aspect, which we often always do on Factory of the Future podcast. Is one of the things I guess you talk quite a bit about is leading organization transformation. And one of my notes here is you use clarity, decisiveness, and credibility. Can you walk us through how you come into that approach, or what's usually your thoughts on that topic?
So the thought, the thought right now when you're talking about this, and I think this really continuation of our previous part of the conversation. Like, what would it take for people to really embrace this, right? So we're talking about how you unbundle your work and you elevate the tasks and responsibilities, and a lot of this really comes. How do you shift the mindset from productivity to transformation? And a lot of it really comes with courage. So I think that from a personal perspective and a leadership perspective, a lot of it really comes down to courage. How to get that courage to take steps that may go against the current structure, how to take those risks, even how to manage those risks, and how to move beyond that fear that we naturally all have to implement massive changes. So, and that does come with clarity. What is it that I want to achieve? The vision, the clarity of that vision. What it is that I want to achieve. And sometimes it's not the entire vision, 100%. My future, for example, is a virtual reality, right? So there are lots of failed attempts, but that path toward the vision and understanding that vision can shift, but your path toward the vision is the true path. I think that what requires a lot of courage and a lot of self-responsibility.
Yeah, no, I agree. I often see the word transformation, and it's a big concept. It's a big concept, and it's a lot of the times. I don't have the data in front of me, but I know it's relatively high that it never meets the expectations. I'm not going to say fails, but what are some of the driving forces that you see that limit success when an organization is trying to change or transform? Really,
where do I start?
I don't know. That's why I had asked. I was like, because I'm writing notes on this because I don't know the answer to it.
So I think that the biggest challenge of transformation is that everything is really, so you're trying to change the status quo. The status quo is not necessarily bad. This is something that the company and business and the person arrives at based on the experience and based on the succession of good experiences, right? And positive reinforcement. So that's where you are. And now there comes a time where that structure cannot hold anymore. And even realization of this is a big step. Even understanding that this is the structure that will not hold in the future, and we need to change that. That's a really big step. a lot of companies never actually go through that step. So we know a lot of examples of really big and very successful businesses. And even though if they knew that the new world is coming, they ignored it because the status quo was so powerful, so strong, and continued to bring profits in this sense, right? So that piece is a very important piece. Then the next one, even if you realize like, oh, okay, well, the life is changing, the world is changing, the technology is changing, my company needs to change with it. Now comes even more difficult part. How do I actually bring that change? And there are layers, so like an onion, right? So there are things that are very easy to do. You can very easily just go and repaint the walls from a gray color to orange color. A lot of people would say, oh, that's innovation theater. But sometimes that's how you start, with very small and very superficial changes. So all of a sudden, the walls are orange. Nobody ever thought that the office walls could be orange, and now they are, right? But then these are very surface changes, the changes that go layers and layers and layers, and come to what are the processes within the organization that can support transformation effort. One of the pages from the Silicon Valley Innovation book, for example, is that embracement of risk and failure. What does it mean? Nobody wants to fail, right? So that's we don't set up to do something to fail, but we need to allow for that failure in the sense that you turn that failure into a lesson. So the structure within the organization that allows for that, for the new initiatives not necessarily be widely successful, but allows for them to fail as well, and not to punish people who took that initiative forward. That's a big step, especially for traditional companies that are really based on that stimulus reaction kind of very linear approach. So you set up the team who experiments, right? So they're all they do, they're experimenting all day long, and then you set up the measurements on how you
Define success.
Exactly. How will you measure whether this was successful or not? In terms of external metrics, but internally, each and every experiment should be a success, because you learn your lessons. You collect the data points, and then you pivot from there. So that's a big step on its own. But then the third step is now they experiment and then they have all these great initiatives. How do you bring them back into big organization? And a lot of what we discussed in the beginning is that big organization and that new effort, they really clash, right? So that's a classic, what's called innovator's dilemma. They really clash, right? Because that new initiatives directly threatens your core business. So there's so many gates that you need to go through for the transformation to be successful. But to your question, and each of those gates can fail. And the further down you go through that, the more challenges and the more difficulties, and the higher the chances of failure, but not impossible, right? If you go through this gate and you're very focused that this is something that needs to be done, and you accept the percentage of those failed efforts, and you excel at learning from those efforts, that's where the transformation happens. And it takes time.
I like how I'm just circling back to your example on, I'd be more interested to understand how Netflix did because that's a full transformation. That's going from to a live stream, but then also the example of Nokia. Netflix had the advantage. They saw the need for the future. Nokia was reacting to Apple, and there's some documentation that shows that they were in a reactive mode because they were coming out too late, and ultimately led to failure. So I like how you talk about it, going through a process and understanding somewhere where there's got to be a roadmap that goes into it, but being early innovators to it is also something that pays the dividend to it, and the organization recognizing that there is a need for change. So Very good. Thank you.
That's awesome. Sorry, I was taking notes because something you said really got me excited, Victoria. And AW, I think that was a great ad and tying it back to the Netflix example. So great commentary there. As you were talking about innovations and the experimenters within organizations, I think it's one thing when a company commits a team to that, right? But one of the ways some of the ways I like to phrase the questions on the show is from a worker's perspective. So let's say you're naturally somebody who would be the experimenter, the innovator, the push on paper walls type of person in a company, but you're in a stale, stagnant, change resistant company. Okay. You're not necessarily punished for trying new things, but you're also not supported. So what advice do you have for people maybe in that particular situation? Like, would your advice be find a new job, do your experiments outside, or try to like make micro changes within your team and your organization that eventually like they will come around to your experiments? Because I've been doing this my whole career, and every time I try something new, everyone's like, that'll never work, blah, 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 blah. And I'm always like, well, we'll just try it and we'll just iterate on it. And then if it sucks, we just go back to the old way, Right?
Yeah.
But like, what advice do you have? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one.
It's a great question, and I want to say all of the above. So try it all. So there are people like that who just cannot stay still, right? So they need to change things, and I think most people are like that, quite frankly. So a lot of conversation that I've been having recently was with experts, people who really have a lot of years of expertise in a particular field. And I think one of the challenges that on the personal level these people have is that they self-identify with the company and with the job. Right. So especially if you spend a lot of time in the company, you tend to kind of identify yourself with that company. And all of us, we tend to identify with the job. And I think, and that weirdly enough, I think goes to the impact of AI as well. I think there is an opportunity and a challenge, and an invitation is really to step back and say, what is there that is mine? But that what is my agency in this process? And I believe that at the end of the day, that's the trend that's going to continue, is that you take the agency over your career and your expertise, and you realize that all those years of experience, all those skills, all those tools, they belong to you. Yes, your company obviously help, people around you help, but at the end of the day, what I've seen, what worked for me, what worked for people that I work with, what I've seen successful is when you start treating your career as your business. So you don't just sit there and dream about how one day I can become an entrepreneur and open my business. You have that business, and that's your career. So that's your agency over the situation. And once you make that shift, there's actually much more clarity of what your next step should be. And sometimes the answer would be, I will continue to try and make change where I am in the organization. And sometimes the answer would be that I need to leave. But I take everything that I have, right? So my expertise, my career, I take with me because that's my business, right? Then it actually becomes much more clear what people you want to talk to, what initiatives you want to get engaged with, what other things you want to do within the organization when you take that ownership and self-responsibility for your career.
What great advice. AW, Victoria, do either of you have anything? I know we're kind of coming up on the time we allotted and we need to be respectful, but I want to make sure that either of you don't have any closing comments, ideas, or anything left unsaid.
Well, I mean, I think we could go around too with Victoria if it came down to it. But let me just give the time to Victoria. Was there anything else that you wanted to bring forward about your organization or something that's really pressing in what's circulating in your wheelhouse?
Yeah, so I think just to continue the conversation that we just recently finished about the advice for every person, what I really like to talk about when we talk about leadership, and I think that's universal, whether the company leadership, individual leadership, is that leadership really starts with self-leadership and not agency over your action. There's so many things that we cannot control. Speaking of uncertainty and disruption, there's so many disruptions from outside world. A lot of things we cannot control. There's a realization that a lot of things that we can control. Right, so I take ownership and self-leadership and responsibility for that.
Okay, great.
That's
And if people
absolutely
want to
right.
find out more about what you're doing, you recommend they go to your website or?
Yeah.
So if you like the topics that we discussed and the ideas that we discussed, we have a fantastic newsletter that you can find on our website. It's called Innovation Insights. So sign up for that newsletter, and we'll be happy to see you there.
It's
Cool.
CV Executive.
svexecutive.academy. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
And we can add that to the show notes, so that way if people are interested, they can click on that and get connected.
Yeah,
Great.
with a lot of other free
Appreciate it.
resources.
Victoria, absolutely wonderful meeting you. Thank you so much for taking time on the show, and we wish you all the best. It sounds like you've got a lot of work ahead of you, and we wish you, I think it's going to be great.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Yeah.
This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.